I'm Reth. Many of you may know me from the Voron Discord. I help out a lot in the resonance testing. I figure I'd make this video to kind of inform people on how to interpret their belt shaper graphs. This first video is just going to be on belt shaper and some common issues. The second one video, and maybe a third or fourth, who knows, is all going to be on input shaper and maybe some troubleshooting graphs, and if people send them to me or whatever. If you need help in any of this stuff, you can always reach out to me in the Voron Discord. It's Reth, name right here, and I'll be able to help you. So let's get to it. The data that I've used for this PDF that is floating around is mainly for Core XY printers. You can potentially use it for bed slingers, potentially. However, none of this belt shaper stuff is really applicable that we're going to go over first for a bed slinger. And the reason is because the different kinematics of the system. Belt shaper and Klipper, we're talking about Klipper here. Belt shaper and Klipper only excites the horizontal axis. It will not excite a z-axis. So for a bed slinger, such as the switch wire, it's a Core XZ system. Klipper doesn't give you the tools to excite the z-axis. You can excite the x-axis, but you're only getting half the motors. So bear that in mind, that a lot of this isn't going to be for a switch wire, an ender wire, or any other bed slinger. Also, it's not going to be for a Delta printer. I don't own one, so I have no idea how it would compare to that. I don't know if it would even be applicable. So, once again, we're just going to be talking about belt shaper in this video. So, the first slide, if you get one of these things, you can follow along, but once again, only Core XY printers for belt shaper. The data is taken from 3D printers and whiteboard. Fricks X, great guy, developed ShakeTune. We'll talk about that more as we do other videos. So note here, belt tension, adding more tension is not always the answer. All right, so you get a bad graph, before we even get to the graphs, just don't go straight to tightening more and more and more. The motors can only handle so much tension at the different pulley positions. So the higher up the pulley on the motor, the less tension it can handle. And before you start bending that the motor pin. Once you bend that, it's not going to spin in circles anymore. You're going to spin in an oval or to wobble on you. The other thing is interpretation of these graphs. Belt shaper or input shaper is not straightforward. There's a lot of counterintuitive stuff. There's a lot of stuff that just doesn't make sense, and some of it is guesswork. Right? Looking at these graphs long enough, you kind of just get a sense of what the printer is doing or what it's not doing. So nothing here is straightforward. It's more of an art at this point. We haven't really characterized these machines enough, and to be honest, it's going to be very difficult to characterize these machines because everybody is modding them different. It's not like everyone's running the exact same thing and we know exactly what it is. So a lot of this stuff is going to be open to interpretation. That being said, common issues. We'll get into this more when we see this in belt shaper, but 2 or 3 spikes may or may not be an issue. It's all going to depend on where that spike is and what does it look like. Do you need to do a test print? Yes. You can try to rely on the graphs, but sometimes you get a bad ADXL that maybe one axis is broken, or you're getting results, but your prints are coming out. Everything, you always need to do a print. And the last thing, but this will be more of an input shaper, but I'll prelude. Just because input shaper says you can do a certain Excel does not mean it's true. It's garbage in, garbage out. If your graphs look like crap, you're not going to be able to do that Excel and have your prints look good. All right. So let's do belt shaper. No, we'll add some text in. Text. So this is what you're kind of looking for. You're looking for, on belt shaper, you're looking for both peaks. So you get the A and B belt here. You're looking for both graphs to have the same. Let me see if I can get a drawing tool in here. So you want same amplitude, same shape, right? Same amplitude, same shape. Now, is this a problem? Maybe. This is going to be our first maybe. This may be a problem. It may indicate something is binding or something is loose on the tool, on the printer. We don't know where it is. So right now I'm saying this is a good graph. If you get a graph that looks like either one of these, you're basically done. You want peaks up here. Now the amplitude doesn't necessarily matter, right? Usually for Vorons, we'll get anywhere from an e to the 4 to e to the 6, right? If you're dropping down e to the 3, you got a problem. And it's going to be the same base number. So it's going to be 2 or 1, e to the 4, or generally it'll be higher than 1, right? E to the 6. It'll be something like that. So it can be 4 to 6. It doesn't really matter. What we want is the peaks are the same. We want everything peaks are the same with the same frequency. This, for something like this, you'll have to run input shaper to see if this is really a problem. Right now, we're going to say it's good. So we go here, right? This is so this is going to be, this is what a standard, I'll go back to this graph here. This is what standard Klipper looks like. This is what standard Klipper is going to give you. This is the data as came from 3D printers and a whiteboard. All right, so I'm going to explain this. So right here, let's see, there's my thing. Right here, you can see there the peaks aren't aligned. So this is our first dual peak. Is dual peak a problem? Not necessarily, right? If this was aligned here, and then you ran input shaper, and input shaper looked good, this isn't a problem. What you can see here is that not only are these peaks not aligned, these peaks here are not aligned. So you also have a difference in amplitude, right? So if you go talk to Fricks, or you go to his GitHub, FricksX_X ShakeTune, what you want, as I stated before, is you want the both peaks to be aligned in amplitude. Does that always happen? No. No, it does not. If you had to choose, do you want the same amplitude or frequency? Choose the frequency. So for me, and the way I would do this is this peak right here, if let's just cross this out. Let's just say we didn't have that. We just had the single peak. If this is what I had, I'd be more concerned about these peaks not aligning and in frequency than they do in amplitude. If these were aligned in frequency, I would call this good. I'm not going to chase unicorns. Input shaper and belt shaper, the biggest issue we have is chasing our own tail and trying to reach perfection. You got to know when to stop. You got to know when to stop. So down here you can see that this though, right? Let's see, there we go. This right here, we have a huge discrepancy. Huge. That's a problem. Okay? Versus this one up here where we have a very tiny discrepancy. Okay, so this is not a big deal for me. This is a problem. What this is telling me is a couple things. Obviously, you guys can read the notes here, but it's telling me that the tensions aren't the same. Okay, so couple things. You literally could have the tensions not the same, right? So one belt is less than the other. What we know, and 3D printers and a whiteboard explains this, right? Let me do this up here. If you have a graph like this, all right, and then you have another graph, let's make this one black, like this. Let's say these are A and B belts, right? A, and this is B. And there's like this. You can tighten B, and it will move it this way. Conversely, you can loosen A, and it will move it this way. It's not going to do a lot. So the closer your peaks are, all right, say you got something like this, the closer the peaks are, the more you can do that. And generally, you're just going to tighten one. But that's, so down here, though, also when you tighten your belts, if I have this here and I tighten this belt, so that's what it's called the A belt, right? If I tighten this belt, it's going to shift this way. And if it's close to the tension of this belt, it will also come up. Right? It's not going to actually meet it, but it'll come up, and it may end up looking like this here. Okay? So this is the very first, we'll call this as the star here. Star here. There's a couple things you got to do. I got another video on tensioning your belts, right? But before you even put the belts on the bed, on the printer, you have to make them the exact same length. So what you do is you route one belt into the printer, and then let me see if I get that picture here. I have a picture somewhere here of the Voron's belts. There we go. All right, we'll blow this up nice and big. Oh, that's not big at all. Let's go bigger. There it is. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, let's see. Is that big enough? Yeah, maybe one more. All right. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna run one belt. Right from here, you're gonna run it all the way over here. You're gonna measure it out. You're gonna give yourself some slack. Right, we don't want these belts to be exact lengths. We get some slack. After you after you run one belt, you take it off, and then what you're going to do is you'll cut it. Right, so sorry, run the belt, give yourself slack, and then cut it. Then take the cut belt you just ran, pull it out of the system completely. Get your other belt and put them together, one tooth higher than the other, and you're going to interconnect them. And just keep pulling and pull smoothly and smoothly. And what you want is to belt that was one tooth higher than before, and it's now going to be one tooth less, and you cut it. So that way your belts, from top to bottom, one belt has one tooth higher on the top, the other tooth has one tooth higher on the bottom. That way you know your belts are the exact same length. After you do that, let me see if I can, let me see here. We're gonna give some pictures because why not? This is all fun and games. All right. So after you do that, right, you got this tool head. You are going to have two belts out here, right? We're going to see. Imagine that this belt and this belt, it's all the same picture. You're gonna have a belt here. You're gonna have a belt here. So one is A, one is B, and then on this side you're gonna have one, and this side you're gonna have one. You're gonna have one A and one B. What you want is on each side. So this will be the right side. This will be the left side. You want these teeth to come out of the carriage. This right here, that's your X carriage, right? X car. Call it X car. X carriage. You want the belts to be even right down there. Right here. You want the belts even, so that the exact same number of teeth for the A and B belt on the left side is the same. You then want to have the exact same number of teeth on the right side for A and B belt to be the same, coming out of the X carriage. If they are not, you're never going to get the glorious perfect graphs because your belts aren't the same length. Even though you cut them the same, if they're not the same coming out of here and out of here, they are not the same. And people ask, does one tooth matter? Yes. It's ridiculous, but yes, one tooth matters in getting the proper tension. So, okay, so that takes us back to these notes here. Let's see if I can get back to it. There we go. Right here, belt not cut the same lengths, belt cut something else in the belt path. You could have an improper tension, right? Another thing that could cause this is improper tension. All right, so now we're going to belt path problem. Okay, so this is a problem, as you can see, right? You've got one, it looks like it's about right, and then you got a second peak with no partner. There's no friend here. Everyone needs a friend. This guy's got no friend. This could be also, you don't have the belts the same length. It could be the same issue, right? A lot of these graphs I'm going to show you, they could all be the same issue. So it takes looking at these things and a lot to really kind of get a sense, right? But what are the main ones, right? You guys don't care that everything can be everything. You want to know what the hell is my graph and how to fix it, right? Well, it could be belt alignment, path, wear, and bearings, right? So what is belt alignment? Well, on Vorons, we'll pull up our handy dandy Voron picture again. We'll zoom that in. This motor here on the B and the A motor. Sometimes there's like a little plastic piece right here. Sometimes people will get that and go around that, so now the belt's on the outside of the plastic piece. It's a very common issue. That could have an effect. Okay, what else? What else is this stuff talking about here? Belt path. What the hell is that? That's what I just said. That's belt path. Belt alignment. You got things. You got your belt not in the middle of all the bearings, idlers, and pulleys. Okay, so let's get some terminology. What is a pulley? All right, let me see. Let me get my green thing. Where's the green? There we go. A pulley. Right? That's on the motor. Pulleys are on motors. Idlers. What are your idlers? They're things that just spin freely. So basically, everything else is an idler. All of your other bearings are idlers, effectively. But when we talk about idlers, we're talking about the 20-tooth idler on the XY joint. Everything else is a bearing. So the pulleys are on motors. Idlers are generally your 20-tooth idlers, 20-tooth idlers, and then the pulleys are everywhere else. What can happen in the belt alignment is that your gantry is not straight, or your belts aren't straight, and a belt starts riding up on the flange of a bearing. And so it may be half on, half off the bearing on the flange. If it's riding on the flange, you could get something like this. Belt wear. If you're using G2, if you're using Rama idlers or BFIs, you can get belt wear on the top and bottom of the belt, which generally won't come up here. What we're looking at more is the teeth starting to go on the belt itself. So if you look at your belt, brand new belt, pristine, nothing happened. You run that thing for a day or two, and you'll notice that the pristine belt now has turned black. Right? It's just friction. It's going to happen. But over time, the shape of the teeth starts to degrade, and that will then your belt on the 20-tooth idler and on the motor pulley isn't going to grip as much. Also, your teeth on the motor pulley and the 20-tooth idler are going to start getting filled up with gunk. As they get filled up with gunk, they could potentially slip, and you could slip a tooth, which means now you're kind of skipping a bit. It may not be such a big skip that your system is going to start airing out, but it's enough of a skip for a belt shaper to pick up. So that's what we're talking about here. So that's basically this stuff here. Okay. So the other thing you could have is these are all, and both of these right here, both these graphs are effectively going to be the same root cause, right? So here, what we're looking at here in the second one is this main peak just jumping up here, right? So this is a problem, and this is a problem. We should see this looking more, let's see if we can clear all this stuff out. Can I get rid of all this stuff? Let's get rid of it. Bye-bye. Is it going to let me? No. Okay. Well, teach me. So this right here, we're looking for something like this. But this here, it's way down low. And our secondary peak is up high. Well, these are both going to be primary peaks for this purposes. This will be our secondary peak. This right here, this situation is not the standard. It should actually be reversed. We should get potentially a high peak like this, and then maybe a little peak, right? Something like that. So this is telling us it's a belt path problem. This right here could be an issue, could not be an issue. You got to run input shaper to verify. A lot of this stuff, when we talk about things like this graph here, we talk about this graph, this kind of thing on a graph, that's when you need to run input shaper to verify, is this really a problem? All right, so belt tension. This is where I was. One of the things I was mentioning before. If we look here, we have this huge gap, right? But generally, the shape of the belt looks pretty good, right? I mean, they're not 100%, but they look pretty good. This is insufficient belt tension. If you see this, well, one really high, one really low, now it could be two kinds of insufficient belt tension. This guy, which is your A belt, I'm just A belt in these graphs, it could be too tight. And this guy at the B belt is at the proper tension. So in that sense, what you would do is you would loosen A. Here, what I found, is that B is actually too loose. So what you would do here is you would tighten B. Now let's say you tighten B by a half turn, right? And it did like this, that kind of shape, right? Well, at that point, it went up. I would check the racking. So when you get a graph like this, right? One thing you have to always have in the back of your mind is every time you only adjust one belt, you have the potential to do what's called belt-induced racking. You are going to throw your x-axis out of line with your gantry. So when you do something like that, you see this graph and you'll do like, oh, Reth said to do a half turn. I'm going to do a half turn. Well, you're going to also have to check your racking of your system. So you do the half turn, right? You run the test again, the belt shaper again, and now you get this graph here, right? Well, what do you do now? What do you do now? What you do now is you kill the motors, and you take your gantry, your x-axis, and you pull it forward, and you do a quick de-racking or racking test. You check to see if you have a gap between your x-axis and your left and right front idler. And so you basically push it forward. You see, do I have a gap? If you hold one side, say you hold the left side of the printer, does the right side bounce? Right? When you try and bring it close, does it bounce? And you could do the other way, hold the right side, does the left side bounce? If it is, you're starting to induce racking, belt-induced racking into the system. A little bit ain't going to be too bad. But you got to be careful that if you keep going with this, right? So let's say, there's my thing, let's say you didn't stop and you just kept tightening. You didn't stop to check for racking and you kept tightening and you were able to get it here, right? Well, if we go back to our picture of our printer, and here's our XY joint, here's our XY joint, that's what we want. We want things like perpendicular, right? Well, if you're just tightening the B belt, B belt, B belt without checking for racking, what you're going to see is your printer is now like this. All right, this is B, this is A. You've now induced a huge belt-induced racking. So if you get to like this point and you're like, now you have this bilgo belt, what does that mean? Right? If you did this, you had this, you tension, and now the belts are looking perfect, but this is what's happening in your picture. What does that mean? That means you had mechanical racking all along. Your machine was mechanically racked. It could mean that. It could mean that your belts weren't the same length. Your belts didn't come out of the X carriage at the same length on each side. So when you get to, if you have this graph and you have this graph, this original graph here, and you tension it and you see it going up, and then this is the result, that's what you got to check. You got to check for racking, mechanical racking, because you've done belt-induced racking now, and it may be your mechanical racking, right? So this is normal, like that. Your mechanical racking was just slightly out, right? Just a little bit out. But now, because the belts and what Belt Shaper told us, we're like this. So when you go back to mechanical, go back, and you got to go back all the way here to racking. Nero 3D has a great deracking video. You look at that, follow that. The one difference is if you've already belted it, is you just have to loosen the belts, and you can still de-rack it with the belts on as long as the belts are fully loose. Nothing is moving on you. So what you want to do is you want to go back, and then say you went back, and now you're getting the same thing again. Maybe it's a little higher. Maybe you fix this, right? So that's gone. So now you're not mechanically racked anymore. But then you put the belts back on, and now you got this will be your orange belt. So your orange belt is like this, right? And the main, can we change colors here? The main A belt is like this, right? Well, you could try the half turn, right? Because you may not be that far off, right? You don't know until you try. So try a half turn. If it brings it up to like here, right? So this is your difference. Go with that. Just be done, right? It's once again, we're not chasing unicorns here, and if you do, you're going to drive yourself nuts. If it only brings it up, if you do a half turn, it only brings it up to here, right? Now you have this huge. You might want to look about whether you have the belts routed correctly. Are they in the center of the idlers, pulleys, and bearings? Are they the same length? Did you forget? Are you a tooth short? Like this here could be a tooth, like a single tooth, right? And then you all of a sudden you fix it. Right now your teeth are exactly the same, and then it shoots right up. They both are now equal. Like it was one stupid tooth. It happens. So this is belt tension. All right. So pin mod, right? May need to push the X-ray. So I got a video on pin mod and what it does. You can see that this is the pin mod, right? So I have this going on here, and this is what I was looking at. Why are they so high? Well, they're still kind of high, but how do I explain this one? So this one here and this one here, right? I first saw it and I looked at this and go, this ain't right. This right here isn't right. It doesn't look right. Yes, this looks right, but this doesn't look right. So what did I do is I investigated more and more and more. And this one, you have to know your machine, right? So this is not going to be blatantly obvious to most, but you have to know your machine. So I knew that this was low for my machine. And so this is 2.5 e to the 6. Even though what I just said way back when is that it's fine, I knew for my machine it was low. So this is more where my machine should be at. And these numbers are variable, right? So that's why everyone always tells you to build stock. If you build stock first and run all these tests and get it pretty good stock, you will know your baseline of your system. If you don't build stock first and just jump in with all the mods, it is hard to know what the baseline of your system is. How does your system behave? So the pin mod, you have a pin, right? Going through a pin, you have your idler, your 22th idler here, and you got a plastic part on top and a plastic part on the bottom. There is no washers in between on the 20. We'll put the teeth in here. Nice little teeth, little things for the teeth, right? Why not? Actually, I think they go this way, but it doesn't matter. All right, that's my idler. What could happen is this plastic part here can start rubbing on the flange. The flange is what sticks out, right? So there's a flange. There's a flange. Your belt's rubbing in the middle here, and once this plastic part just touches the flange, it starts to rub. And then this bottom part here, the bottom plastic can also touch the flange and starts to rub. What do you get? You're going to get basically an amplitude issue, right? So the amplitude's going to go down because now you're damping the system or you're binding the system, even though you're both of it. But you're also going to get this weird kind of separation that fricks. This is ShakeTune's results, right? So ShakeTune's telling me that there's this huge discrepancy here. This is your harmonics. You want to see that like that. You don't want secondary harmonics. So this is actually not as good as it should be because I got a secondary harmonic here. You don't want that. You don't want that. You don't want that. You want basically a single line coming down and this guy going like this. So what happens? And all this information here is based off your graphs, and it's based off the I believe the max power spectral density. This number here. So I saw this. I go, something's not right, and I saw this. Something's not right. I investigate. Found out that's the plastic. Found out it was all this whole thing. Right now you can see, even though my things aren't good, right? There's a delta. They're significant. This is e to the 6. So this line here is the same line as line here. Right? And this line here, this is right above that. That is probably what, 2, 4, 6, 2, 4. It's probably about here. Okay, so even though the orange peaks, like this peak right here went up, so this one guy went up, and this guy stayed about the same, and this, so they all this secondary and tertiary peaks, they all stayed about the same, but this went up. Both of these, so that now these are less of an issue. If they're in the green area on these FrixX things, they're not really an issue. So this is one way to tell the pin mod. The other way is going to be on your input shapers. So there's that. So let's look at some of FrixX's stuff. I think Frix has some pretty good graphs here. All right. So if you don't know, it's just you type in Google, you ShakeTune FrixX, brings you to his page right here. Let's see. No, good. All right. So okay, so let's go with this. Let's understand his thing. It tells you how to use it. He gives you an explanation here of what this stuff does. All right, and then we get some graphs. So these are the good graphs. This graph over here, not the best, but it's okay, right? It's okay. The peaks aren't exactly aligned. There's 2 peaks. You want one. You want 1 peak. Do we settle for 2? Yes, we settle for 2. All right, and they're kind of same frequency, same amplitude. This was slightly off, but this one's good. I mean, you go with it. Incorrect belt tension, right? He gives examples of these. So this here and that there, huge delta between them. That's no good. This is the better example, right? So this one right here, I would more be inclined that a half turn, quarter to a half turn would fix this. This one, not so sure. All right, this one, I don't think I think maybe a full turn, maybe a turn and a quarter would get you up there. But then you have, once again, you're going to have belt-induced racking issues. All right, so this graph, what does this mean? Right, the crap's all over the place. If I got a graph like this, I would probably de-rack. I would. So Frick says it could be tension to. I mean, there's a whole bunch of issues, right, that he goes into. The first, if you get a graph like this, let's go back to the graph. Okay, you first have to make sure that your graphs, that your tension's right. If your tension is right, and each belt is at 110 hertz or 115 hertz over 150 millimeters, what would I do? I mean, I'd probably try to tighten one belt, tighten the other, see what happens, and get frustrated and have to take a break. You're probably gonna, if your belt tension is right, you're gonna want to just take the belts off. For this kind of graph, just take them off, remeasure the belts, right? Make sure this, double check the same length, and then do it again. If they are the same length, do it again, and make sure you're mechanically direct, and take your time. What this can also come about of is when you initially belted your printer, and you got both of them on and you start tensioning it. During the tensioning process, you're like, well, something's not right. And you notice a belt is hanging on a flange or is not fully on a bearing or pulley, and you've been tightening it with this thing not on, and you're like, oh, I'll just go slip it back on, it should be fine. No, no. If you're tensioning and your belt path is not perfect, if you're not perfect, but all your belts aren't centered on their pulleys and eilers and bearings, then you can't fix it just by pushing it back on. You've already thrown tension into the system, and the belts are tensioned, and by trying to get it off if it's flange and put it on now, you've thrown the tension, you've thrown your whole tensioning out. Your best bet is to loosen the belts and do it again, and make sure that every time you turn that wrench a half turn, that all the belts are still on. So that's what I would do for this one, right? This one here, check the belt tension. Is the belt tension correct? If not, I'd try tensioning. Maybe I just didn't tension it enough. If it is the same correct tension, I would look to see if I have a belt path problem. Did I tension it with a belt on a flange? If that's not the case, you just undo it. Just start over. Just loosen those belts up, right? Make sure you're not racked and start over. So that's kind of the foray into belt shaper. I know a lot of stuff I said was potentially contradictory, and it does come down to that right now. This is more of an art than a science. It depends on how you built the printer. My system is not going to be like your system, even though we both could build stock, a stock Voron. We both could build stock, and you get certain graphs and I get certain graphs, right? I can't, because you built yours and I built mine, and we built them differently. They're not going to be the same. No two printers are the same, even though they're stock. But we do know the general shape of what these and the general ideas of stock printers, what they should look like. When you throw mods on, we know what some of those mods. We know what the pin mod will do to certain aspects of your graph. We know what the umbilical does if you're doing CAN bus, right? We know what tap does. We know the effects or some of the effects of going to a lightweight X-axis or CNC parts. But no one is going to get the exact same graphs. And so a lot of this is art. It's knowing what to look for, and if you see a graph, the first thing I always do, let me pull that back up. Right? How do I troubleshoot this stuff? I either use my how to read input shaper graph. I use this, or I'll use FrixX's GitHub page. I'll compare the graph to what it looks like. And does mine, since most people will have access to Frix, we'll use Frix. Which graph of these does mine look like? Now, Frix doesn't have all the graphs because he's a lot more conservative than I am in throwing information, he wants to know what the cause is, where I get a sense of where the cause is, right? So you're only going to see graphs in Frix's X things that he knows that's the problem. I've got a little bit more wiggle room. I do a little bit more wiggle room in my stuff, but I'll compare it. What I'll do is I'll take a graph and I'll play a matching game. What does it look like more? Does it look like this more? Does it look like this more, right? Or I'll go in here and, where did it go? In here and say, which of these graphs does it look like this, and I'll compare it and I'll try to see where it's at. The other thing you can do when you're troubleshooting belt shaper is when you troubleshoot this, you gotta, and a lot of it is feel too of the printer. So when you're starting to tighten the belts, you can feel when that belt is really starting to catch. When you've got rid of the slack and you can feel it, and you have to, when you're tightening things, right, as you're trying to adjust it to correct the graph, you kind of have to get the sense of this is too much. I know Reth said do this. And I know the graph says to do this, but the tension here, it just feels too much. And it might be. And that might be something else going on than what either I or somebody else said to you. So when someone says, oh, that graph is 100% this, it may be. It may be. And it could be multiple issues. So that's belt tension. I know not everything you wanted to know. If you have questions or if you want some help interpreting your graphs, come on over to the Voron Discord. I'm generally around there. There's a lot of other good guys. Fricks is also there, and there's a lot of other good people there that can understand some of the stuff and help you out. Oh, do not use this for switch wire or any bed slinger that has a Core XZ printer. Belt tension does not work. I know I'm remembering now that I said that in the beginning. But once again, do not use this Core XY only. It will also work potentially, I haven't tested it, on AWD or all-wheel drive or the four motor hybrid Core or Core XYs with the two A's and the two B motors. You're kind of looking for the same thing there for this stuff. If you got any comments, if you think I didn't explain something good enough and you want me to go over it, if you think some of my explanations just didn't make sense or I was convoluted, let me know. I'll update the video. I'm not really concerned about monetization of this. This is just trying to get the information out there so people understand how to read these things. If you want me to go in more detail on that, we can do that. The next video will probably be over Input Shaper. It may be a long one, it may be a short one, depending upon how I want to break it up. Anyway, thanks for watching. See ya.